Karoline Leavitt stands up to a liberal activist. What she says next will shock you. Anchor Dave Cooper leaned forward, a smug expression on his face as he prepared to attack. Known for his fiery and often condescending interviews, he believed he had Karoline Leavitt cornered. The liberal activist beside him nodded in agreement, both thinking they could tear her down with their sharp words and pointed accusations. But what they didn't know was that Karoline wasn't the type to back down. As the lights of the studio flickered, casting a sharp contrast between the well-lit stage and the shadowy faces of her opponents, Karoline's eyes gleamed with resolve. The room was about to witness something unexpected. She had faced countless challenges before, but today she stood at the crossroads of history. This was no ordinary interview. It was a showdown. Dave Cooper thought he could corner Karoline, but instead she did the unthinkable. She turned the tables on the media with a single statement that had everyone in the studio stunned. The tension in the room was palpable. The cameras rolled, capturing every moment as the familiar faces of the liberal activists beside her exchanged smug glances, anticipating their victory. The audience, both in the studio and watching live at home, was glued to the screens, unsure of how this debate would unfold. Karoline, you've had a long-standing history of supporting conservative policies, but here's the problem, Dave began, his voice dripping with condescension. You're out of touch with the reality of the struggles people face. You claim to represent the average American, but your ideas, your policies, only benefit the privileged few. Do you even understand what it's like to live without privilege? Do you have any idea about the struggles of marginalized communities? Karoline's expression remained calm, her eyes never wavering from Dave's. There was again the typical accusation, the claim that conservatives didn't understand the struggles of ordinary people. She had heard it all before, but today she wasn't just going to take it. Well, Dave, Karoline said with steely resolve, I might not have the same upbringing as some, but I've seen enough to know that it's not about dividing us by privilege, race, or class. It's about coming together to solve real problems. And I'm not about to let you or anyone else tell me what I believe, or whether I have the right to fight for a better future for everyone. The studio fell silent for a moment, the air thick with tension. Dave's lips parted as though he had expected a defensive reply. But this was different. Karoline wasn't playing their game. She wasn't crumbling under their pressure. Instead, she was standing tall, ready to expose the flaws in their argument. Dave hesitated, his prepared rebuttal hanging in the air. His eyes flicked to his liberal counterpart, who was already shaking her head in disbelief. This wasn't the response they had anticipated. They were so used to confronting conservatives with their supposed lack of empathy. But Karoline had turned the tables. She was the one now making the case for a united future. And it wasn't just about politics. It was about values, hard work, and common sense. We can talk all day about policies, Dave, Karoline continued, her voice growing stronger with each word. But the truth is, it's not about left or right. It's about doing what's right. It's about giving people the opportunity to succeed, whether they're a single mother working 2 jobs or a young immigrant trying to build a better life. Dave's face flushed as the crowd shifted uncomfortably. They had expected her to falter under the weight of their accusations, but instead, Karoline had managed to turn the narrative around completely. The media's favorite narrative of conservative heartlessness was quickly crumbling under the weight of her words. You see, I've spent years meeting people from all walks of life, Karoline said, looking directly into the camera. I've met teachers, farmers, doctors, factory workers, people who are doing everything they can to make this country better. And I've seen what happens when we stop dividing ourselves. When we stop using labels and start focusing on what unites us, we get results. That's the kind of leadership we need. Not more anger, not more division, but more opportunity. The room fell even quieter. The audience, at first skeptical, was beginning to sense the sincerity in Karoline's voice. The activists beside Dave shifted uncomfortably in their chairs, realizing they had underestimated her. This wasn't the easy interview they had hoped for. They had prepared their lines, their accusations, but they had failed to account for Karoline's conviction. You can call me out all you want, Karoline continued, her voice unwavering. But what I'm saying is true. We need to stop letting politics control our lives. We need to stop fighting each other for scraps and start working together to create something better. For the first time in the debate, Dave Cooper was speechless. His usual quick retorts were nowhere to be found. The crowd could feel it. He was losing the battle, and he knew it. The host's eyes darted around the room, but no one offered him a lifeline. Karoline had done something no one had expected. She had disarmed the critics, leaving them with no ground to stand on. Karoline wasn't just fighting for herself. She was fighting for everyone who had been made to feel small by the loud voices in the media. She was fighting for those whose struggles had been ignored by the so-called progressive elites. And in that moment, the studio audience and millions of viewers at home felt it. Karoline's message wasn't just about politics. It was about empowering every American citizen to take control of their future, no matter their background. She wasn't some talking head spouting off rehearsed lines. She was a fighter. And this, right here, was her declaration of war against the fake news machine that had held so much power for so long. As the lights above the stage flickered, casting shadows on the faces of the panel, Dave Cooper opened his mouth, tried to regain control of the conversation. But Karoline was already ahead of him. She had already changed the course of the debate. She had already won the audience. And now, it was up to him to try to recover. The next few moments felt like an eternity. The tension in the air was thick, but Karoline stood unshaken, knowing exactly what she had to do. She wasn't just defending her beliefs. She was defending a future where people like her, people who weren't afraid to speak the truth, could lead this country. The camera zoomed in on Karoline's face, her expression determined and calm. This wasn't the same woman who had walked onto the set just moments before. This was someone who had found her voice, and she was using it in the most powerful way possible. For the first time, Dave Cooper realized that Karoline Leavitt wasn't just a political figure. She was a force, and he had underestimated her. As the debate continued, it was clear Karoline had won. The audience was no longer listening to the usual political arguments. They were listening to her. And for the first time in years, the conversation about what truly matters, unity, opportunity, and the power of the individual, was finally taking center stage. As the tension in the studio lingered, Karoline Leavitt stood tall, unfazed by the attempt of the liberal activists to challenge her. The room was thick with an uneasy silence, but the media panel had one last chance to strike back. Dave Cooper, now visibly rattled by her confident stance, took a deep breath and began speaking again. "Karoline, you've been very vocal about your belief in unity and opportunity," Dave said, his voice dripping with skepticism. "But let's talk about the reality. How you explain the millions of Americans who continue to struggle? What do you say to the families who are living paycheck to paycheck, who are fighting to survive? Can your ideals help them? Or is this just a pipe dream?" Karoline's eyes remained locked on Dave's, her expression unwavering. She had expected this type of attack, but she wasn't about to let him or anyone else derail the conversation. She knew the power of her words. She knew the importance of the message she was sending. And more than anything, she knew that now was the time to stand firm. "Dave, let me tell you something," Karoline began, her voice cutting through the air like a sharp blade. "I don't have all the answers. No one does. But I do know this. It's not the system that's broken. It's the mindset. The problem isn't that people can't succeed. It's that they've been made to believe they can't." The words hit like a thunderclap, echoing in the quiet room. The audience, still unsure what direction the conversation would take, was now completely captivated by Karoline's response. Even the liberal activists beside Dave Cooper were visibly taken aback. They had expected Karoline to stutter, to backpedal, or to lose her composure. But what they got instead was someone who wasn't afraid to challenge their worldview. "I've met those families you're talking about," Karoline continued, her voice calm yet filled with passion. "I've met mothers who work 3 jobs just to put food on the table, fathers who work late into the night to keep the lights on, and children who are learning the value of hard work at a young age. These people don't need handouts. They need an opportunity to succeed. And that's what I'm here to fight for." Dave's face turned a shade redder as the weight of her words began to sink in. He was so used to tearing down conservatives, so accustomed to undermining their arguments, that Karoline's unwavering conviction left him speechless. The crowd, however, was hanging on her every word. You see, Dave, we've been told for years that the government is the answer, that politicians can fix everything. But let me tell you something. Politicians don't create jobs. Businesses do. Hard-working Americans do. The government's job is to get out of the way and let people succeed. The room erupted into murmurs as Karoline's words resonated with those in the audience. The liberal activists exchanged uncomfortable glances, realizing that they had underestimated her. She wasn't just talking about policies. She was talking about a shift in mindset, a change in the way people viewed themselves and their potential. You want to talk about opportunity? Karoline continued, her voice gaining momentum. Opportunity isn't about waiting for a handout from the government. It's about creating an environment where people can work, grow, and achieve their dreams on their own terms. It's about giving them the tools to succeed, not holding them back with endless regulations and taxes. Dave shifted uncomfortably in his seat, clearly caught off guard by Karoline's defiance. He had expected her to falter, to crumble under the weight of his accusations, but instead, he was the one left questioning his own stance. The people you're talking about, Dave, the ones who are struggling, they're not looking for more government programs. Karoline said, her voice now filled with quiet authority. They're looking for opportunity. They're looking for the chance to work, to build something for themselves and their families. And that's exactly what I'm here to help create. A government that empowers people, not one that traps them in dependence. The words hit like a tidal wave. The room was now silent, everyone holding their breath, waiting for Dave Cooper to respond. But he had no response. He had been defeated not by facts or logic, but by Karoline's unwavering belief in her values. The entire conversation had shifted. The narrative had changed, and it wasn't just about the debate anymore. It was about the future. I'm not here to tell people what to do, Karoline continued, her eyes never leaving Dave's. I'm here to give them the opportunity to do it themselves. And that's the real answer. That's the solution we need. The camera zoomed in on Karoline's face, capturing the intensity in her eyes. She wasn't just defending her position. She was standing up for an entire generation of Americans who had been overlooked, ignored, and dismissed by the political elites. She wasn't just a politician. She was a voice for the voiceless, someone who believed that everyone deserved a chance to succeed. For the first time in the interview, Dave was speechless. The audience, still in shock from Karoline's powerful response, began to applaud. It wasn't just a polite clap. It was an eruption of support, a recognition of the courage and conviction Karoline had shown in the face of adversity. But the liberal activists on the panel weren't ready to give up just yet. They tried one last-ditch effort, throwing out accusations of greed, inequality, and exploitation. But Karoline wasn't fazed. She had already won the debate. She had already exposed the flaws in their arguments. And now, it was time for them to reckon with the truth. I'm not interested in playing your games, Karoline said, her voice unwavering. I'm interested in real solutions. And real solutions come when we stop blaming others and start empowering people. The interview concluded, but the impact of Karoline's words lingered in the air. The media, which had once vilified her, was now forced to confront the truth she had laid bare. She had not only stood up for herself, she had stood up for every American who had ever been told they weren't good enough, smart enough, or capable enough. Karoline Leavitt had proven, once again, that the power of belief, the strength of conviction, and the courage to speak the truth could change everything. As Karoline stood in the glare of the studio lights, the tension that had built up throughout the interview began to dissipate. But what remained in the air was palpable, a sense of awe, of disbelief. The audience, still in shock from her powerful response, watched as she stood resolute, unshaken by the onslaught of criticisms that had been thrown at her. It was clear that this interview had taken a turn no one had expected. Dave Cooper, unable to hide the unease on his face, tried to regain his composure. He had always prided himself on his ability to take down conservatives with ease, but Karoline had done something he hadn't anticipated. She had turned the tables, exposing the fallacies in his arguments, and doing so with such grace and confidence that it left him speechless. Despite the media's attempt to frame her, Karoline had risen above the noise. She wasn't interested in being just another talking head, another politician repeating the same old lines. No, She was determined to make a difference, to change the narrative that had been forced upon her generation. But Karoline wasn't just going to stop with this interview. She knew that this moment was just the beginning. Her message had already been heard by millions, but she needed to make sure it resonated beyond the walls of the studio. As the cameras continued to roll, she spoke once more, her voice calm but filled with determination. "You see, the problem with the way we've been doing things for so long," Karoline began, "is that we've allowed fear to control us. Fear of change, fear of standing up for what's right, and fear of what might happen if we do. But fear is a lie. It's a tool used by those who want to keep you in line, who want to keep you dependent on the system they've built. And I won't be a part of it." The room went silent once again. It wasn't the silence of discomfort, but the kind that came when a powerful truth had been spoken. Even Dave, who had made it his life's work to criticize and belittle conservative voices, was forced to listen. In that moment, Karoline had not only made her point, she had made him and everyone in the room rethink the status quo. "I believe in a future where people don't have to rely on handouts to survive," Karoline continued, her gaze unwavering. "I believe in a future where we can all rise together, not by tearing each other down, but by lifting each other up. And I believe in a future where everyone, regardless of where they come from, has the opportunity to succeed, to make something of themselves." Her words hung in the air, a quiet but powerful call to action. The liberal activists in the studio, once so confident in their positions, now sat quietly, unable to respond. They had been outmatched not by facts or figures, but by Karoline's unwavering belief in the power of the individual. Her message had cut through the noise of partisan politics, exposing the truth that so many had been afraid to acknowledge. But even though Karoline had won the battle, she knew that the fight was far from over. She wasn't naive enough to believe that one interview would change everything. But what she did believe, what she knew in her heart, was that this was the start of something bigger. She wasn't just fighting for herself. She was fighting for every American who had ever felt ignored, overlooked, or dismissed. As the interview came to a close, Karoline stood tall, her face filled with a quiet confidence. She had said what needed to be said, and now it was time to let her words do the rest. The media may have tried to paint her as just another politician, but she had proven them wrong. She wasn't just another face in the crowd. She was a voice for the voiceless, a beacon of hope for those who had been left behind. As the camera panned out, the studio erupted into applause. It wasn't polite clapping of an audience that had been instructed to cheer. It was the sound of genuine admiration, of respect. For the first time in a long time, the media had witnessed something real. They had witnessed a politician who wasn't afraid to stand up for what she believed in, no matter the cost. The interview was over, but Karoline's words would linger in the minds of everyone who had watched it. The media would undoubtedly try to spin the narrative, to frame her as they had framed so many before her, but it didn't matter. Karoline had already won. She had already changed the conversation. In the days and weeks that followed, Karoline's message continued to spread. Her words were quoted in news outlets, shared on social media, and discussed at dinner tables across the country. She had sparked a conversation that couldn't be ignored, a conversation about the future of America, about the power of the individual, and about the importance of standing up for what is right. And as Karoline moved forward in her journey, she knew that the road ahead would be long and challenging, but she was ready. She had proven to herself and to the world that she was more than just a conservative voice. She was a leader, someone who could inspire change, and someone who would never back down in the face of adversity. The fight for a better future was just beginning, and Karoline Leavitt was leading the way.